It's Emma with Super Awesome Cool Pottery. Today we're going to be making something kind of different. Ready? Ta-da! We're making an elf on the shelf out of polymer clay. Yeah! So here I've got a few sketches I did. This one here is how big I want my finished project to be. He is about 3 hat heads tall. And then over here I have some close-up sketches to reference for details. But you could also use photos if that's easier for you. And then this big one over here is for scale or size. So we're going to start with this eye here. And we're going to start by prepping what's called a polymer cane to make the elf's eyes. So I'll explain a little further. When you look closely at the eye, you can start to identify the little shapes and colors that make up the complicated image. So by breaking it down, I'll be able to rebuild that shape like a little 3D puzzle out of clay. I start with a cylinder for the highlight, and from there I build around it with slabs and prisms of clay, bulking out the shape so that it all fits together like a puzzle. This forms our polymer cane, which is going to look like a block of clay stacked together when we're done. You'll see what I mean. The idea is you can then roll the cane out a little bit to bond the clay together, and then you can cut slices off to reveal the image you built inside. Have you ever made those slice and bake cookies with the pictures inside? It's the same idea. So in the end, you end up with a bunch of little eyes that all look the same. Nice! Okay, so now that we know the basic idea, let's try it out. I've got blue Sculpey here, black and white, and you can use whatever colors you want for your elf, but I'm doing the original one who has blue eyes, and I've got a flesh color here. So you're going to want to take a second and knead out some clay, because it's usually pretty hard when you get it out of the package. I'm going to go ahead and start by making that little highlight in the middle of the elf's eye and making a teeny tiny little cylinder. You don't need it very big because it's going to be the very center of that big shape we're making. Now I'm going to make this little, I guess, donut shape. It's like a slab that I roll into a donut around my cylinder here. And the tools I'm using, I have like a sharp cutting tool. I have a toothpick I'm using, you can see in the image. I have a tool with a rubber tip that's good for smoothing things out. I'll show you later. And I've got like a little rolling pin thing that's very helpful soon. You'll find. I'm adding those little prism shapes to bulk out my form. The idea is if you squint really hard, it probably looks the way it's supposed to. Now I'm going to add a slab of blue to be the color in my elf's eye. looks like a really weird piece of pizza. So far so good though. I'm going to start adding white after the blue, so making another slab, slightly bigger than the blue one. And a prism to cap off that shape. Nice. Now I'm going in and I'm making the top lash line for my elf here. All the elves have eyelashes that are all the same, I think, so that's pretty uniform. For the little eyelashes on top, I'm making a teeny tiny cane that's going to be incorporated into my bigger cane. So this one I'm just going to layer black in my flesh tone here a couple of times, just so I get that kind of stripe pattern almost. And that's gonna sit above the eye and be my eyelashes. Start filling in around the eye with that flesh color. Again, you can use whatever colors you want. You could make your elf have purple eyes and green skin. It would be kind of exciting, actually. I'd be really interested in seeing that. Show me your own, like, elf ideas, if you have them. Tell me about it. That would be cool. I'm gonna make his eyebrow the same way I made the upper eyelash, where it's just a very thin slab kind of sitting on top. Felt like it was too long, so I'm just trimming it down to size here. It's always good to have that reference image because you can look back at it, kind of see how the shape should be looking compared to the other shapes. It's a good way to check your progress. I'm about done, so I'm making this long strip to wrap around my entire cane to be like a little safety guideline there. Give me some extra space when I cut later. Don't want to lose any of those details. Now that my cane is assembled, I'm going to set it aside. It's very warm right now, and I would like to give it a chance to harden up before I go to cut into it to get a cleaner image out of it. So we're going to clean up the cane, set it aside, and we're going to focus on the body now. I'm going to construct an aluminum foil core for each main part of our elf now. So that's going to mean the hat, the head, and the body. You can see off to the side, I've roughly sketched the size and shape each armature piece needs to be to fit inside each part. So I'm making a small cone to be his hat, a small sphere to be his head, and a small cylinder for his body. Using aluminum foil as a core for your polymer clay sculpture gives you a good base to attach clay and sculpt off of, and it also saves you clay because your sculpture isn't solid clay all the way through, where no one can even see it. So that's some clay you get to use on some other project. That looks pretty good for our body. So there's our 3 armature pieces. And now I'm taking some nice soft clay and I'm just going to squish it into all the little crevices left by the aluminum foil. This is going to smooth out our armatures so we don't get any like weird bumps or dents in our clay when we sculpt on top of it. So I'm just filling in all the cracks and gaps, making it nice and smooth. A lovely flesh cone. It was just the softest color I had. Sorry if it looks kind of weird. Now I'm just going to continue this process for the head sphere and the body cylinder. I'm going to take soft clay and just smush it into all the little gaps and crevices and fill them up to make a nice smooth shape. So there is our 3 finished base pieces. Ta-da! I'm going to set those aside and I'm going to start rolling out this red clay for his little elf suit. Mine's actually sparkly red, so it's extra special. I'm going to go ahead and fold the clay in between this sheet of aluminum foil just to protect my rolling pin, because this is a highly pigmented clay and I don't want to stain my rolling pin. I'm just going to keep rolling it out till it's nice and thin. I test it against the body piece I'm trying to cover on occasion just to make sure it makes it all the way around. It has to be a little thinner. That looks about good, so I'm going to start trimming off excess pieces here. I'm just going to roll it up, wrapping it up like a present. Smoothing the edges out, trimming excess, just trying to get it nice and smooth on our base piece. That's that rubber tip tool I was talking to you about earlier. It's one of my favorites. Checking my reference to make sure it's a good size, and capping off the ends. Smoothing those seams out. Great. I'm going to squish all that extra clay back together so we can recycle it. Roll it back out. Oh, see? Stained. Told you. Now I'm going to wrap the hat of the elf with the extra red clay. Smooth that out. Can you see the sparkles in the clay? It's kind of hard to see on the film, but I swear it's sparkly. It's really cool looking. Here I'm trimming away a little bit of that excess so I have room for the brim of his hat, which is white. Cleaning up the edge a bit. Trying to pick up some of that clay I left on my workspace. Oops. Gross. Let's go ahead and check on in with that cane we made earlier. Remember? So I'm going to trim the edges where they're a little bumpy, just so it's as smooth as I can get it. A little cleaner. And now I'm going to roll it out. Let's see what we get here. Rolling it on out into a little snake, and then I'm going to trim those ugly bits off the edge. Not every slice is going to be perfect, but hopefully we'll get some good ones out of here. See how we're getting some color? Keep rolling until it's about the right size for our elf. Now we can make some cuts. See what we've got. The clay moved a little bit. Not quite perfect, but still cool looking. I want to use these for other projects in the future too, so I'll hang on to these. That's a good looking cut. I'm gonna give them all a little squish to kind of reshape them. It's my knife one to flatten them a bit. So now I'm gonna pick 2 that look really similar to use for my elf. The rest I'm going to set aside for later. So now I'm going to start the delicate work of sculpting our elf's face, and I'm just doing this by hand. I'm just adding some clay to bulk out our armature, make sure it fits our little scale drawing we have. This rubber tip tool is really one of my favorites. It's really good for smoothing out clay and doing fine details. Here I'm measuring where I want to put the eyes on my elf. Go ahead and smooth those carefully onto my head. We'll be really careful with this part because we don't want to ruin any of that nice detail we got in there with our cane. I'm just using the chisel tip on my rubber tool to Smooth out those edges very, very carefully. And integrate the eyes into our sculpture. I'm just going to keep adding clay to bulk out the head of our elf. Using that rubber tool to make sure all the edges are smoothed out. Need some cheeks. Smooth those out too. It's a good idea to rotate your piece too. This is a 3D piece of art, and we want to make sure that it looks good from every angle. Chin, we'll add that in. I liked making his little mouth, that was kind of fun. Cute. I noticed his forehead is a little sunken for the hair, so I'm going to go in and add some more clay real quickly just before I start adding hair on top. I'm just roughly sculpting out the shapes of his little hair blobs that are sticking out from under his hat, sticking them where they should go on his head, and giving them a little trim so that there'll be room for the brim of his hat when we get to that. I'm not covering his whole head in hair because, like we were saying earlier, we don't need to cover everything in Sculpey. If it's not going to be seen, then it doesn't really have to be that pretty. We can save that Sculpey for a different project. Just checking out what the hat looks like on the head right now. Need to add some hair underneath the hat in the back here. Gives the illusion that there's hair under the hat too. Oh, I almost forgot his ears. Those are important. Stick some flesh-colored blobs behind his sideburns here, and we'll sculpt those to look like little ears. Pointy, because he's an elf, of course. I just do a little indent to make it look like there's detail in there. Ears are hard. Again, we're just sticking that hair on and trimming it down to size. Looks pretty good. I'm gonna bond the hat piece to the head piece with a little bit of extra clay and fill in that gap between head and hat. So we should be all ready to add that brim in now. So I'm gonna start flattening out this white clay. It is so hard to keep white clay clean, by the way. I'm doing my best here, but if it looks a little dirty, please excuse me. I'm just, oops, off screen, making a little strip here and cutting it down to match my concept art. Smoothing out that rough edge where I cut it down. Making sure it's stuck real good to my head here. Step is the arms and legs. So again, I'm going to start with an aluminum foil base here. This is a little trickier though because I'm basically making little noodles that are going to be little arms. So just do your best. Try and condense the aluminum foil as much as you can to get some strength out of it. Remember to reference your rough sketch. It's very helpful, especially if you have a scale rough sketch like me, because then you can just look straight at your drawing and go, that's the right size. I did decide I wanted my legs a little longer than my sketch, so that's reflected here. And just like we did earlier, we're going to go in and we're going to fill in all the gaps and crevices in our aluminum foil base with a little bit of soft clay. This is going to give us a nice smooth base to work off of in a minute. Flesh noodles done. Now I'm going to start rolling out red clay again so I can cover the arms and the legs. Again, I'm going to cover my red clay first in aluminum foil to protect all of my surfaces from the high pigmentation. I'm just roughly wrapping up this little noodle in my thin red clay and smoothing out the edges to create a little sock almost that it's sitting in. sides are symmetrical. Time to recycle that red clay. I'm leaving a section of the end of the arms uncovered because the hands of the elf, they have little white mittens, the elves do. So I'm making sure I leave some space for a little white mitten at the end. Here's our pieces so far. I'm gonna attach the head of the elf to the body now. So let's see here. I've got a little bit of clay. Yeah, that looks normal. Very long neck. So I marked on the neck where I want the ruff to sit. Now I am smushing the neck down onto my clay. And he looks a little scary. So I'm just gonna build up the top of his little elf onesie a bit, just so his neck doesn't look so long and alarming. Okay, home stretch. We're coming down to the last details, which are all in white. We're gonna roll out some white clay to make the ruff around the elf's neck and the little mittens on his hands. We'll do those mittens first by cutting off these round edges. Just kind of smush them on there, gently smooth them out. Looks good to me. Now I'm going to cut out this kind of pointed shape here to make his little ruff. I'm just freehanding this. Peeling it out. And I'm going to wrap it around his neck. But first, let's attach those arms. It's a little tough, but I'm just smoothing the edges against the body. Trying to get a really good adherence here. We'll do the same thing for the legs. Just stick them on real good and smooth those edges. last detail, we'll add our elf's little neck ruff here, his little collar. Just smooth those seams, make sure the edges look neat and tidy. And there he is. Put him in a cute pose that you like, and bake him according to the directions on your modeling clay. And that's a wrap. Thanks for making this elf on the shelf with me. Happy holidays, guys. Merry Christmas from me, Miss Emma, and Super Awesome Pottery. Bye-bye!